Okay, we should be live now. Uh,
Cool.
hey, Chris,
Yes.
great to have you back. A lot of people were very disappointed our call was cut short last time.
Right, right.
So
Yeah, thanks for having me.
yeah, great to have you back. We um, we agreed that we would go on where we left off last time. I say this because I usually do two talks with a week in between with one and the same person, and the second talk is where they decide the topic and get to ask me questions. This time we're doing it a little bit different. We're going to continue where we left off last time because I think we were just hitting on a good subject, and I at least I would like to go in a little bit deeper. So
Yeah.
I'm very glad that you said it. You don't matter it how many calls it takes. You'd be happy to do it. So uh, I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Okay. So where we left off last time was about the relevance of the Bible, and we got to uh, a lot of verses. The last was we what we were discussing was the resurrection of Jesus and the accounts we have of that in the Bible.
hmm
Um, but my initial question was, why would we even look at anything in the Bible? What makes the Bible a source of truth in as far as you see it?
Okay, so I could do one of two things. I'm going to go with the latter. So the first thing that I could do is bring up all the manuscript evidence for the Bible and show you, like, due to the volume and the accuracy of the Bible, that we could know from the Bible that these events actually did happen. That there are people who this actually happened to. Now, we're not going to do that. What I'm going to do is go leave the Bible off to the side and just go with the history of it, with the everything else that happened around the events that the Bible attests to. So the first person I bring up, the first person I did a little thing on my channel was Tacitus, and a lot of people have done Tacitus, but Tacitus in his history of the Roman Empire um, records that in 64 AD, Nero began a persecution of the Christians. Now that
Mhm.
means that and according to and if we take Tacitus at his word, and I think we should, that means that there were Christians in Rome, a significant population, that they started in that the Christian religion, as a distinct from Judaism, began in Judea, and it was centered around the person of Christ, a real figure who was executed under a man named Pontius Pilate. And we also know a few other things
I,
from that. Yeah.
I still don't think that that's what we have enough evidence for to say that that's really what happened. Um,
Okay, but if you're going to be
the fact that there are Christians is also irrelevant because if we look at today, we have Christians, we have Muslims, we have Jews, we have Buddhists. Uh, there are a lot of religions that are still in practice, and there are even older ones than Christianity and Judaism. So
right,
the fact that people practice a religion doesn't say anything about whether or not they uh, what they believe is actually true.
true.
And that's where I
Now,
want to get at,
right,
because
right, right.
and
And this isn't and this isn't the history that we're that. Well, hold on. gather that thought. Um, you're right, and just the fact that someone practices a religion doesn't mean it's true. Sure, but what I'm showing and what Tacitus shows us is that Christianity was being practiced very early and very consistent with the Christianity that we practice today, both based on what is said in the Bible, sure, but who Jesus was and what he did.
Okay,
Centered
but you
on
are
a person.
you are aware that the Christianity that you are talking about is actually a lot of different small sects, as they were called back then.
Yeah, and and every
It wasn't one religion. It wasn't one religion until I think the year 327, when the Bible was canonized.
325.
325.
Yes, that was the Council of Nicaea.
Yes.
Now,
so
okay, so we're leaving the Bible out of it.
If you say there are Christians in Rome,
right,
that at least means that there were several different churches, if you like.
Galatia, Ephesus, Corinth, yeah.
Yes. So it wasn't a Christian religion, and it wasn't all the same Christians. It was different people, different churches, all with different beliefs and different different holy text.
If you're talking about that, what I think you're talking about, and I want to make sure we're on the same page, is that we're not talking about the Gnostics. Are we talking about the Gnostics?
No, I'm just talking about the churches that ultimately led to the first real Christian church and to the first real Christian Bible.
Okay, if we're not talking about the Gnostics, then we're not talking about a divided church. We're talking about a group of people, yes, spread out over the Roman Empire, who all followed a certain Christus, a Jesus Christ who was crucified on the cross, according to Tacitus.
But all with different stories and different texts. So if you would be very honest, very honest, they were all following a different Christ, because they all had different views about him, and that's if it's just one person, then contradicting views could never lead to one distinct person.
Okay, but if we're going to take the postmodernist spin on it, where Christ means something different to different people, then your own channel has a few different views of who you are. Does that mean you're several different people? No, it doesn't. It means you're one person. And this is the same thing in the Christian church.
How would my channel say that I have different views? I still have
exactly.
the same.
And this is my question to you when you say that there are a bunch of different Christians following different Christs. That's not true. They're following one Christ, just as all of your followers are following one Peter.
No. If they describe a different person, they can't all follow the same person.
And this is the thing. They all describe the same person, the same crucified and resurrected person.
No, they didn't. They didn't. There are a lot of texts that were proposed to be canonized in the Bible that weren't.
We're not talking about the Bible.
There are even books in the Bible that refer to those texts that didn't make the Bible.
Okay, A, no, they don't. B, there's B, we're leaving the Bible out of it. We're not talking about what people. If what you say is true, and the Bible wasn't written until later,
we can't leave the Bible out of it, because my question was, why would we take the Bible as a source for truth?
And I'm going to, and I'm showing you that by by going through the other historical corroboration of what the Bible says.
Okay, but you started with Tacitus.
Correct.
And
yeah,
okay,
and he said,
go ahead.
Right. So Tacitus tells us that within 30 years of the alleged death of Christ, there is a large population of Christians in Rome. And Tacitus records that the outbreak of Christianity was in Judea. Judea is the last place where you expect for the for something like Christianity, talking about the death of Christ at the hand of Jewish leaders and his resurrection, would break out, because that's in the heart of the place that would disprove what Christianity says.
I don't think so, because
How do you think?
Jesus was a Jew.
Correct.
So I would expect him to be in a country where Judaism was the prevalent religion.
Correct.
So that would be in Israel.
Correct. We agree on these things.
But you say you wouldn't expect him there.
If it was false, you wouldn't expect it to start there. If it's true, then it's absolutely where he would start. If it was false, the Jewish leaders could have shown with reason and evidence that Jesus Christ did not rise from the dead, as the apostles claimed. But they couldn't.
Which they still do until this day.
Yeah, but we don't care about until this day. We care about within the first century, within the lifetime of the apostles,
they
within the early church.
They did that in the first century too, because if they hadn't, we wouldn't still have Judaism.
Sure we would.
No, because then all the Jews would have accepted Jesus as the Messiah.
By that argument, there should be no flat earthers today.
That's an analogy I don't get.
Okay. You and I know that the world is round, yes?
Yes.
Yeah, obviously. Now, but there's a large group of people out there who believe that it is flat.
Yes.
We're talking about some time warp at the edges of the world or something. What's that?
Why? Why do they believe that?
I don't know.
I do. Because I talk to people who believe that.
Okay.
And they believe that because that's what the Bible says. And they're correct.
Okay. They're not correct.
Yes,
that's not what the Bible said. Yeah, and I know where we could go with that. Joshua and the sun standing still in the sky. Is that their evidence?
No. Their evidence is that the Bible speaks of the circle of the earth. And not once, I think several times. The Bible also tells you that there's a tree from which you can see the whole world. There's a mountain from where you can see the entire world. And a circle is flat.
I see what they're saying.
And it's completely different than a sphere. And
I see what they're saying. Okay,
modern day Christians tell me that was the term used for a sphere, and they're incorrect as well. Because at the time of the Bible, at the time those texts were written, it was a well-known fact that the earth was a sphere.
Okay, the Bible often employs hyperbole. All right, that's not what the Bible is saying when it says that Jesus was taken to a high place and saw all the.
It's exactly what the Bible. It's exactly what the Bible is saying. It's also saying that the world rests on pillars, which is incorrect. It also describes that there's a dome covering the earth. a crystalline dome. So
the expanse in the sky, the one that was broken in Noah's flood.
Yeah. Yes.
All right.
So they are, at least the Bible says, and in that view, they are correct. That it's completely nonsense, and we know it is.
No, they are really, really not correct, and I'd want to talk to them.
No. If you talk to Bible scholars, they will tell you the same. They will tell you that the Bible describes the earth as being flat. And not just in one way, in different ways. So, but let's leave the flat Earth out of it.
Yeah.
Because I still don't get the analogy you just made.
Okay, well, my point was that people will believe crazy things in spite of all evidence. And you know this.
Yes.
Okay. Now, same in Judaism. In first century Judaism, people will not believe in Jesus Christ, regardless of all evidence, of all eyewitness testimony, of all empty tombs. That's my point with that.
Why wouldn't they believe if there was good evidence?
I don't know.
If you see someone who was killed and you know that he was killed and he's walking around 3 days later, I think you won't get any better evidence than that.
Correct. And the people who actually saw him walking around were the apostles.
We don't know that. That's what we discussed last time. We don't know that. All we have is secondhand testimony. So people heard that the apostles saw him, and they wrote about that. None of the people who actually saw him wrote anything.
Matthew and John and Paul.
No, because that's what I told you last time. We don't have any texts.
We have John's words.
Yes.
We have Paul's words.
We also have Harry Potter's words, but that doesn't mean that he really existed.
Correct, but Harry Potter isn't connected to the actual world in which we live. Jesus Christ and the apostles were.
Yes, but
this is the difference. There's no historical attestation to the events of Harry Potter. There is historical attestation to the events of the Bible and the early church.
There's a lot of historical evidence when you go to the book of Harry Potter. London exists.
But there is no platform. What is it, 5 3/4, 9 3/4?
I can send you an actual picture because it's there in London, and you can go visit it.
Okay, but no one died for the belief that Harry Potter was true. No one died while knowing that Harry Potter was a lie, to saying that Harry Potter was true.
Okay, and now let me make an analogy.
Okay.
You're aware of 9/11?
Yeah.
People died for Allah. Does that make him real?
No, because those people were not in a position to know that Allah was true. And this is the difference between people dying for the Christian faith in the first century after seeing Jesus Christ, and people dying today for Christianity, saying that they saw Jesus Christ.
I don't see the difference. If people today are dying for Jesus Christ, I'm pretty sure
because
there's none of them that actually saw him.
Right, and that's because, and the reason we don't take their testimony that Jesus Christ was true, but we do take the apostles' testimony that that Jesus Christ is true, is because the apostles were in the unique position of knowing that what they were dying for was true or not.
But we don't have that. That's what I'm trying to tell you. All we have is people who heard the apostles' testimony and then wrote it down. We have
Yes, we
no
have the bone.
we have nothing firsthand, not one single document stemming from the time Jesus was alive. We have not one single document from the time that he was supposedly crucified. But what we do have is documents about what would happen if someone was crucified. Do you know what was common when someone was crucified? What would happen to the body, you think?
What was common was it was put in a pauper's grave.
Did the family
That's what was common.
Did the family get the body back?
I would think not, but I don't know of anyone other than Jesus.
We know for a fact that the bodies weren't given back to the family and that they were buried secretly, so the family couldn't visit the grave. So if Jesus was crucified, that's what would have happened to him.
Okay, when was this edict put out?
This was common practice in the time, and we know that because we have the writings from the people in charge at the time.
Okay, A, you're being inconsistent because you're not trusting all the writings. You're choosing which ones to believe and which ones not to believe, and that's being arbitrary. Number two,
no,
where
I draw the difference is that we have texts and we know who actually wrote those texts.
Okay, and again,
we know that it was law in that time to do it that way, and there were no exceptions.
Okay, and then my point number two that I didn't get to. Number one, we do have John, and it says who wrote John within the text of John. And B, every letter of Paul's starts out, I, Paul, a something of Christ, usually like something like servant or slave of Christ, to the church at given city. Okay, every one of his letters starts that way. We know who wrote those letters, and it was Paul.
No,
which attests to a risen Jesus Christ.
Actually, the opposite, because we know that a lot of the letters of Paul are forgeries. Because and how can we know this? It's done by studying the letters we have, and that there are different styles of writing, different usage of words. So we know for a fact that
yes, Paul's literary style changes over time. Do you write the same way you wrote 5 years ago? I would say not.
I'm quoting Christian Bible scholars who think that the texts are
no, you're quoting the Jesus Seminar.
No, I'm quoting Christian Bible scholars. The same Bible scholars that have confirmed that Second Peter is a forgery and that it wasn't written by Peter at all. So there's if you study the Bible, there are two ways that people use the word studying the Bible, and the most common thing I found when talking to people is that if they say they study the Bible, what they actually do is read it, and I think not always even reading the complete Bible. but they're reading parts of it. Bible study would involve a lot more. It would involve going out and searching for the documents, searching for the history, searching for the backgrounds, searching for evidence that backs up what the Bible is talking about. And that's what Bible scholars do.
Okay, I'm going to get to my second point, and then we'll return here. So the second point that I was going to say about crucifixion is that if you're, it occurs to me that what you might be talking about is the edict that no one may be allowed to have. There was a law that went out that no one was allowed to steal corpses from graves, and the reason for it was that you have this this Christian element and this Judaic element that where the Christians claim that someone rose from the dead, and the Jewish element that said they stole the body, and it's causing friction within the Roman Empire. So to stop it from happening again, the Romans said, no, we're stealing the graves, and you may not steal the body. The penalty is death for doing that. The reason that edict exists is because Jesus rose from the dead.
You think that before Jesus even appeared, they didn't have a law that you couldn't steal from a grave? You think that law was?
So there'd be no reason to. This is the reason why.
There would be no reason to. Do you think people were allowed to take everything from a grave before that?
There was no
Really?
reason to. The only thing that was in a grave was a body.
What on earth makes you think so?
Now, yeah, there's a bunch of there's a lot of ancestor worship going on in Europe at the time, but even so, it wasn't a problem before Christ.
All over the world, people were buried with different kinds of objects.
Yeah, but no one was stealing the body. That's the thing.
I'm not sure that's correct either.
And I'm not sure you're correct about the Jesus seminar. So
I would like to see that particular order that went out, that it only then became illegal. Because
sure.
that's you can say that, but I've never heard of it. So I would really like to see that order, because that's completely new to me. It's if you go back to the Egyptians and what they buried with their dead, and even on their dead, on the mummies, there was a lot of gold. So I think that taking the corpses was illegal thousands of years before that.
And it was illegal for the Egyptians for obvious reasons.
I think for more people. I think a lot of people who were buried may have had jewelry on them. So I think it's to me it sounds ridiculous that that it took Jesus to come up with an order that you couldn't steal from a grave. That's and as I said,
it wasn't that you couldn't steal from the grave. It was that you couldn't steal the body from a grave.
Okay, but that would mean that it was legal to steal the body before. And that's not something
not really. It's just like, why would you even do that? Well, after Christianity breaks out, okay, there's a reason that you can't steal to make this a law.
One very good reason would be people for medical purposes.
No.
We know at that time that the Romans were performing surgery on people we have their instruments from that time. So
okay, but physicians didn't need to steal bodies from corpses to do that. They had a coliseum to steal bodies from, if that were the case.
And you think that would make for enough bodies for all of Rome, for all the doctors to practice on?
What doctors? Medical practice was not widespread.
It was.
The common practice was bleeding.
It was in ancient Rome. It was in ancient Rome. Go check it. It's not a secret. It was.
Okay, but none of this says that Jesus didn't rise from the dead.
No, but it's also not evidence for Jesus rising from the dead. Everything we know from history is that it couldn't have happened as described in the Bible, because they wouldn't even have his body. And we're still talking about.
Yes, they would have, because
we're still talking about things we only know from the Bible. And my question was, why would we take the Bible as true?
Okay, and no, we're not. Three things. First, no, we're not talking about things that we only know from the Bible. I've been talking about stuff that we know from corroborating evidence. You're the one trying to draw it back to the Bible, which is where we're about to go in fact 3. Number 2, one more talk on crucifixion. The reason why the Romans would have been absolutely comfortable giving the bodies back to families is because a full Roman crucifixion involves 3 things, which we all see at the crucifixion of Jesus, but leaving that aside. Number 1, they were flogged. Okay, and the flogging tore all the skin off their back to maximize pain. Number 2, the actual crucifixion. They were nailed to a cross and hung there to die. Number 3, even after they were dead, they were given something called a death blow. And the death blow, the purpose was to make absolutely certain that this criminal, this rebel, this insurgent against the Roman Empire was absolutely dead. And it happened in 2 ways. One, they take what's called a maul and smash a person's skull. And the second way, the quick and easy way, the one available at Jesus' crucifixion, they were stabbed in the heart with a spear.
Okay, and
so fourth? They were absolutely. So what's that?
And the fourth? Because there was another one.
What's that?
They were left hanging for a couple of days.
Yeah, because it took a couple days to die. And some people didn't care for the bodies, so they just left them there on the crosses.
Which didn't happen to Jesus, right?
Correct. He was given a death blow and taken down, according to the record.
Which would be inconsistent.
Yes.
Which would be inconsistent with what we know about the practice that was done at the time.
Because the bodies were left up as a warning. By the way, the other 2 thieves were still on the crosses. We don't know what happened to them. They could have been left there.
So you think that the number 1 enemies of Jesus would make an exception for him not being humiliated for a couple of days after he died?
When you say the number 1 enemies, who are we talking about?
The people who crucified him.
The Romans? Or are we talking about Pontius Pilate? Or are we talking about the Sanhedrin?
I'm talking about the people who actually did the crucifixion. Because I'd say...
so the Roman guard, the Roman contingent, the soldiers of Pilate and Herod.
Yes.
Okay. All right, so what were we saying about them?
Why would they make an exception for Jesus?
Because he didn't wrong Pilate or Herod. According to the Bible, which we're about to talk about, Herod just thought he was crazy. Pilate didn't want to kill him. It was the Jews who wanted him dead. The Sanhedrin specifically. and they didn't want the, according to the record, they didn't want the bodies on the cross over the Sabbath. And B, they didn't have a reason to humiliate Jesus. They just needed him dead.
I'm still struggling with the fact that it was common practice. It was done to everyone that was crucified.
Common
and
practice.
Suddenly there's just one single person where it's done different. And different in a couple of ways. They don't leave him on the cross after he died, and they give back his body, which was completely against the rules.
No. There's a difference between common practice and the law. Okay.
It was the rule that they would be on the cross for a couple of days. It was the rule that the body would not be given back to the family.
It was only common practice, the rule for the body to not be given back to the families after the edict went out that no, the families can't have the body, and they can't steal the body either.
Sorry, but you're completely wrong about that. I think you need to check that because you're completely wrong.
I'll show you the edict.
You can show me the edict, but before the edict, the bodies weren't given back. It was common practice that the bodies weren't given back. It was common practice that they were buried secretly, so the family couldn't even retrieve them after they were buried.
Which might be why Jesus was buried in the tomb of Joseph of Arimathea, rather than given back to Mary and the family members of Jesus. We don't know what that conversation looked like.
They weren't buried in tombs at all. They were buried in mass graves.
Typically, they were buried in paupers' graves. Yes, Joseph of Arimathea gave up his own tomb for Jesus to be buried in.
He can give up his tomb as much as he wants, but if you don't get a body back, you don't decide where it's buried.
And according to the record, he was given the body back.
You still don't get it. That record is in contradiction with everything we know about the time. And that record that you're
and I think
that record that you're referring to, where is that record? Where can we find it?
I'm sorry, what was the last part? You cut out for a second.
You said the record showed that they were given the body back.
And now we're talking about the Bible, yes.
Okay. So now you're using the Bible to prove that the Bible is correct.
Yes, because you keep fronting the Bible and saying, but the Bible says, and I'm trying to lead you to what the Bible says by other ways. You're not having it. So yes, now we're going to talk about the Bible.
Yes, but you can't use the Bible to prove that the Bible is true.
Yes, I can.
That's circular reasoning.
Okay, we have 30,000 pieces of manuscript evidence, some of them even full texts of the Bible from before the year 325 AD.
Yes.
If you do the math on that, that's a new copy of a piece of the text, either of Paul's letter to the Galatians or the gospel accounts or whatever. There are 30,000 of those, and if you do the math, that's a new copy of it being made every 3 days since the year 0.
Okay.
Okay. Now, and that's just the manuscript evidence we have.
And you know that no two of those are identical?
What was it? 98.6% accuracy, according to Bruce Metzger.
Yes.
Yeah.
Could be.
And none of the errors, that 1.4%, none of that changed.
And none of them are the originals.
Correct.
So we have a lot of copies.
A hell of a lot of copies.
That
So many
yes,
copies. More
that
copies than the rest of the copies of every other ancient text combined within the
yes,
span of 300 years.
yes.
So what that means is that these copies go all the way back to their original founders. They center in Judea.
Unless you have an original, having copies is it doesn't help you.
Do you have the original of Harry Potter?
The original exists.
Then how do you know that Harry Potter was ever written?
And I think that if pressed, that we could see it.
Okay, I'll think of a better example.
And even if we had the original texts, we still would be proving that the Bible is true because the Bible says it's true, and I want to know why it's true, not because it says so.
And it's true. This is the point of a new copy every 3 days. We know that it's true because it goes. We know that it must be true that way because it would have to go all the way back to the people who actually wrote it.
If I write down a lie, and I have at the moment I think a little over 750 followers on Twitter. If I write down a lie, and if I send that lie out to all the people that follow me, and I ask them to ask 10 people to make a copy, and ask those 10 people to ask another 10 people to make a copy, and ask those 10 to make a copy, at what point will my lie become true? How many copies would it take?
When you're willing to die for that lie.
What if I wrote a lie that people are willing to die for?
No, that you die for that lie. That's when everyone ought to be well and convinced that you believe that whatever you wrote was true.
Let's say these are my last words and I'm dying for it. Because that's the amount of evidence we have. We have no shred of evidence of an actual Jesus, and people are still, at the moment, it's more and more scholars are thinking that Jesus never existed. Another part thinks
quite the opposite.
No. Another part thinks that Jesus did exist, that he was some kind of rabbi preaching in Jerusalem at the time, who was, after he died, and he could have been crucified, so I'm not ruling that out, but after that was mythicized, and that is something that can happen in just a few decades, and it would even happen faster at the time, because people didn't have radio, didn't have TV, didn't have newspapers. Everything was one person telling another. So it would happen a lot faster than it would have today. So if you take all of that into account and still come up with zero evidence that he even was an actual living person, because a lot of what is attributed to Jesus,
going back to Tacitus,
a lot of what was attributed to Jesus was already to other gods or demigods. If we go to
now as for the gods and other As for the things of Jesus being attributed to other gods, that doesn't happen in the archaeological record until after the year 325.
Sorry, but
Not a
it
shred
does
of
have it.
resurrection,
It
of
does.
birth, of whatever
The
that would happen
record. The
belongs to
rest.
any other god before the
I
year
can
325 when Christianity becomes popular.
list it to you.
I'm sure you could, but you
Born.
couldn't
Born.
substantiate any of that with a piece of archaeological evidence from before the
Yes,
year
we could.
325.
Yes, we could. Look up Mithras. He precedes
Again,
Jesus. He precedes Jesus
yes, the
by more
deity of Mithras,
more than a century. And Mithras was born on the 25th of December, was born of a virgin. He walked on water. He fed the people.
yes, the deity
With
of Mithras exists before Jesus by, sure, I'll take your word for it, on 100 years. But not a one shred of archaeological evidence shows that anything that you just listed about Mithras was attributed to him before the year 325
yes,
AD.
No. We have the documents that precede Jesus that list these attributes. That's how we know.
From after the year 325.
No.
In which case, which way is the osmosis of information going? Diffusion of information going?
How would we know that it precedes Jesus if we only have documents that were made after 325?
I'm sorry, what?
How would we know that he precedes Jesus by over 100 years if you only had documents from after the year 325?
Because you have other documentation and archaeological evidence that showed people worshipped Mithras before Jesus by about 100 years.
Mithras wasn't even the first, because Mithras attributes were copied from an Egyptian god, all listing exactly the same. And there are a couple of gods where we have documents tracing back to a long time before Jesus was even born, listing those attributes.
There is no death, no resurrection of any of those gods from before the year 325 AD.
Yes, there is, for Mithras at least.
There's the
resurrection account that people don't take it seriously. I don't see that as a problem, because I don't take the Bible account seriously, because I still lack any evidence that what is stated in the Bible is something that actually happened. And my best evidence for that is that it lists a lot of things that we know now definitely didn't happen. And if the Bible would be the infallible word of the living God, then how come it can contain catastrophic errors?
Peter, I'm just
because
trying to
the Bible doesn't start with Jesus. You're starting with halfway down the book.
Yes, to the central event that the entire Bible is pointing towards. This is why the Christian faith doesn't hang on the Bible; it hangs on Christ. This is what this is one of the things that I'm trying to get across.
And that's something I still don't get, because if it all hangs on Christ, then why hang on to the Old Testament? If that's irrelevant.
Because the Old Testament, it's not that it's irrelevant. The Old Testament points towards Christ. It points towards a Messiah.
In what way does it point towards Christ? Because I still fail to find anything that points towards Christ. There's not a single text that points towards Christ.
The Old Testament to us is irrelevant as far as as far as proving Christ. Although I know there's a lot of people out there who would talk about the
that wasn't my
prophecy.
question. You said it points towards Christ. My question is, where does it point towards Christ?
Okay, well, Isaiah 53 and 54, 53 specifically, describes the suffering servant who matches Jesus to a dotted I and cross T.
Okay.
So there's that prophecy from, I want to say it's 500 years before
Do you think
Jesus was around, but
do you
not
think
sure on that.
do you think the people during Jesus's life had access to that text?
Yes. Yes,
Okay.
Isaiah was a very common prophet.
See?
Very common, very
Could it
major
could it
prophet.
could it be that people helped along a bit to make it match?
I'm sorry?
I said, could it be that some people helped along a bit to make it match? Or do you think
I don't
that's
know what you mean by that.
if you have a prophecy and you know what is in the prophecy, and you have a certain time that that prophecy should come true? Is a train coming past?
Yeah.
I thought so.
Yeah.
See, that's the problem with prophecy. A prophecy can only work that if the people the prophecy is about have no idea that the prophecy was ever made. Because then it could be possible that people are influencing events
What?
to make it look like the prophecy. And I think the best example we have today is the state of Israel. The state of Israel wouldn't have happened if it wasn't mentioned in the Bible that it would at one point be a nation again. That is what definitely influenced politicians to make it happen.
Yeah, I know. But that's not the case with Christ.
And then still, that doesn't point to one specific person. And that's another thing. If you make a prophecy, you have to make a prophecy that only points to one specific person. So that would include a name. And you
Not
have
necessarily.
so how
And
would
B,
you so how would you check if the person that you think is the one fulfilling the prophecy is actually the right one? How could you check if you don't have a name?
because it matches every other thing that was said in the prophecy. And with this prophecy as specific as Isaiah 53, that's why it's a favorite. I'm going to go ahead and look it up now. When you have a prophecy as specific as Isaiah 53, it gets very, very hard to fake something like that and try to push it onto something. Okay, so he grew up before him like a tender shoot and like a root out of dry ground. He had no beauty or majesty to attract sin. Nothing in his appearance would desire him. He was despised and rejected by mankind, a man of suffering. Like when he was despised, we held him in low esteem. Surely he took up our pain and bore our suffering.
Okay, and you think
Stricken
that, and you think those things are in any way specific? Because I was listening to the ones
He was pierced for our transgressions, spear to the side, nails in the hands, crushed for our iniquities. The punishment that brought us peace was on him. The crucifixion, the death, the joyous exchange.
Are you now reading from the Bible, or are you now trying to match the actual facts that you read elsewhere in the Bible to the prophecy?
No, this prophecy, just if you know what you're looking at, it clearly points to Christ.
No, you're not going to a prophecy knowing what you're looking at. You're going to a prophecy, then reading it, and from there see where it points. You have a conclusion. You and I are looking. You have a conclusion, and all you are doing now is looking at the prophecy with the conclusion in mind.
Yeah, it's 2020 hindsight.
And then reading it so it matches your conclusion, which is completely backwards.
Yeah, it's 2020 hindsight. Of course, if you want to know that a prophecy is true at the time it's given, then you look for
no, that's not how it works. Because if it's a prophecy, it should be pointing to one single event, single person, and could not be pointing to any other. And the things you just read from the Bible are so vague, they could mean anything. There's not one specific
He was pierced
fact.
for our transgressions. He was crushed for our iniquities. That's talking
pierced.
about atonement.
Okay, let's take he was pierced. Why didn't it say he was crucified and then pierced with a spear? Because that would make it unique to what happened to Jesus. You can pierce people in a lot of different ways. It doesn't even come close. If I go out in the street today and I ask someone, what does piercing someone mean? I can assure you that no one is going to mention crucifixion.
Yeah, and of course, you and I are looking in 2020 hindsight. You have no reason to say.
No, I'm not. No, I'm not looking in hindsight. This is what I want to. What I want to make clear. If you read that text, he was pierced. Can we at least agree that there are a lot of ways in which you can pierce a person?
Yes.
Okay.
Obviously.
So
that's why it's a totality of that. Prophecy. There's also a totality of that prophecy.
No. Stick to the topic. Can we at least agree that in that text, piercing does not point to a crucifixion?
Piercing
it could point there, but it could point to a lot of different ways to pierce someone. That's what I want you to acknowledge.
Yes.
Okay. Can you name another thing in the prophecy? What you think is accurate?
I don't do prophecy. I do history.
So why did you go here?
But by oppression and judgment, he has taken. He was pierced for our transgressions. He was crushed for our iniquities. The second half of those statements, for our transgressions and for our iniquities. That's talking about atonement theory.
He was what? He was crushed?
For our iniquities, yes.
Okay.
The punishment that brought us peace was on him.
No. Let's go back to that particular word. He was crushed.
Yeah. Can you acknowledge that there are other ways of crushing people than by literally crushing them?
What would be another way of crushing someone without crushing them?
Oh, how about all your friends desert you? People make false charges against you. You're brought before a court of law. You have more false charges brought against you, and that you demand. Wouldn't that be crushing?
Yes, but did that happen to him?
Yeah. according to the
Didn't
Bible, which you
didn't
don't accept.
didn't no. Let's stick to topic.
Mhm.
Did his followers denounce him?
His followers deserted him, and yes, according to the text, Peter denounced him.
They deserted him.
Yes, according to the
So
text, which you don't accept.
So they didn't start Christianity after Jesus died.
No, they denounced him before he died, and then afterwards they saw him alive again. They saved their own necks in the beginning, and in the end, they sacrificed their necks for the truth, for the claim that Jesus rose from the dead.
Help me remember, when was the Last Supper?
Passover, Thursday before Good Friday.
Okay, but in relation to the crucifixion.
Yeah, the crucifixion was on Good Friday.
You said they had deserted him.
Right. When he was arrested in the Garden of Gethsemane, according to the text, when he was, they had the Good Supper. Judas leaves to go betray him. He takes all his disciples out to pray in the Garden of the Gethsemane. Judas goes to the this is according to the narrative. Judas goes to the Sanhedrin. He says, "Hey, I know where Jesus is going." He brings out the guards of the Jewish authorities. They take Jesus. The rest of the disciples scatter, and this is where I think you're going. So this is when Jesus goes to trial before the Sanhedrin. It's a mock court late at night. Peter follows, and when he's accused of saying, "Hey, you knew that guy," he says no.
That's deserting him?
Yeah.
Or is that a way to save your life and to not be crucified along with Jesus? Because I think I would do exactly the same, and I wouldn't be deserting someone.
True,
I just would want to stay alive.
True, and as long as we're following another line of thought, what would then cause you to give up your life for saying that man I just deserted? He's the son of God. What?
You said they deserted him.
Yes.
Now you're saying they didn't desert him.
Peter, is there more than one way to desert someone?
I don't know, and I don't
I say yes, there is.
I don't assume. I ask you, because I can throw in my own assumptions, but that wouldn't get me to what you believe, and if it's true, yes or no. That's why I'm asking you. It's not because I want to mock you, because I want to trick you in any way. What I'm doing is getting to what you actually believe. And if you say they deserted him, and then 5 minutes later tell me that they didn't desert him because they had the Last Supper the day before, and they scattered at the moment that Jesus was arrested, what I see is people trying to save their own lives.
Correct.
Which would be normal.
Right.
Which would in no way to me mean they deserted him, because they could have run away and trying to think of something so they could save him. If they had themselves arrested, they wouldn't be able to do anything. So I still don't see the deserting part in people running away. Am I seeing it? Am I seeing it wrong? Tell me.
Yes, very.
Would you do different?
it would still hurt if I had 12 disciples and they all ran away from me when I was in trouble. It would still hurt.
You
And this is
wouldn't
what we're
you
talking about in
wouldn't
the.
you wouldn't think they're saving their own lives and they will come back and they will help me and they will try to find a way to get me free? That wouldn't even come to your mind.
How did we even get here? Look,
We got here because I asked you, and then you named the prophecy, and in that prophecy there were words, and when it came to the word crushing, I asked you what crushing meant. I'm
yeah,
just
and the full
tracing.
thing what
I'm just
happened to
tracing.
Jesus is crushing.
I'm just
We're not
tracing.
specific, and then you're attaching it all to what deserting means and say, oh, that's not deserting. I mean, you are being unreasonable in how you see this text.
Why? Doesn't
I don't
isn't
know.
isn't
That's something you have to answer now.
okay? But isn't a prophecy meant to point to just one single person?
Yes.
Okay. Didn't we now conclude, as far as we've gone so far, that that's absolutely not the case? Because
No.
the things
Because
listed in this prophecy are so vague. They could mean anything. If crushing,
no, they are
if
not.
crushing,
And this
listen
is
to
what I
me.
was trying to say earlier.
Listen to me. If crushing can mean just being mentally crushed or disappointed because people leave you, why didn't the text say he was left by his disciples? Because that's when then we would have
Okay,
something.
and now that we're on this verse, this is a very good place. So yes, pierced, crushed, the punishment was on him, and by his wounds we are healed. This is talking about a messianic figure who atones for people's sins, and this is the power that Jesus claimed for himself. Didn't reveal how until he was crucified. That's where this text becomes important.
No, it doesn't.
It's not so
Because
much talking about exactly
no,
what is.
it doesn't. And the reason it doesn't is because we're now still back to the Bible being evidence for the Bible, which is circular reasoning. If you want to prove that the Bible is correct, you have to do it with something extra biblical.
Tacitus. I go
Tacitus
back to
wasn't
Tacitus.
even
I go back to Pliny the
Tacitus
Younger. I go back to,
Tacitus wasn't even alive when the first Bible was canonized.
but he records that in the year
He, re,
64
he,
AD,
he
there
records
was
not
a
a single word about the Bible. That's what I want to make you
correct, and
realize.
you are okay, Peter. On the one hand, you are asking me to prove the Bible without the Bible, and on the other hand, you're saying this guy doesn't corroborate the Bible. You're demanding that he talk about the Bible and say the Bible is true. You can't have both.
How can Tacitus confirm a book that didn't even exist until 200 years after he died?
Because it's not about what the book says. It's about what the book claims. It's about what the book claims happened in history. It doesn't matter what is written in the biography of George Washington today. It matters what those events match back in the life of George Washington.
Yes.
And this is the Bible. And this is what I'm showing you with Tacitus. That they all point to the same person.
I'm not denying that there are historical facts in the Bible. I think that's where we might have a misunderstanding, because I don't deny that there are historical facts in the Bible.
Yeah, but we're in total disagreement on what those historical facts are.
No, the fact that there are historical facts in the Bible doesn't tell me anything whether or not a God exists unless we have a historical fact which describes uh, actual supernatural events.
Which is exactly why I'm dragging you to the resurrection.
Yes, for which we have no extra biblical evidence, not a single word.
Tacitus!
No, Tacitus wasn't even alive at the time.
But he records that there was a lot of people in the first century, within 30 years of Jesus' death, who did.
Yes,
And then we can go.
which is if we were in a court of law and someone would accuse you of murder, and all they had against you was one single person saying that he spoke to someone who knew 500 people who saw you do it, would that be evidence to convict you of murder?
No, what would be evidence is when
That's the
10
evidence
guys
you
go to
have.
their death, plus 4, I think. When 14 guys go to their death saying that guy killed someone, that would be proof in the court of law, which is exactly what we have in the Bible.
It wouldn't. It wouldn't.
Actually, not in the Bible.
People die.
We're talking about
people die for the wrong reasons every day.
Then we're not talking about a court of law anymore.
No, I'm talking about something they believe. People die for their beliefs every day. That doesn't make them true.
Then you can't convict anyone of murder.
That's what I'm trying to tell you. That's exactly what I'm trying to tell you. It's not evidence. It's not evidence.
But that is not how you apply this principle in the real world.
Of
you
course
are
you
being
do.
inconsistent in how you apply these principles.
No, I don't. The fact that people are willing to die for a certain belief has no bearing on whether that belief is actually true.
Then you can't convict anyone of murder.
That's something.
If you don't take anyone at their word, you can't convict anyone of anything in a court of law. You actually can't believe in anything whatsoever.
No one is convicted for murder only on eyewitness testimony. No one.
No one today, but that speaks to how screwed up our court of law is.
It's not screwed up because it's proven to be the least valuable piece of evidence that we have.
Not true. We go back to cold case files all the time, and we convict people based on their eyewitness testimony.
No, we don't. And you can go look it up.
And so can you.
Eyewitness testimony is the worst way of evidence, because we have.
Okay, let's explore this a little bit further then. What makes eyewitness testimony unreliable?
Because people recall things in different ways.
Correct. Now,
do you know let's for instance, do you know how memory works?
No, I can't say that I do.
Okay. I'll tell you a simple thing that would at least make it a little bit clear. Can you remember something that happened to you 10 years ago? Something, yes. Okay. In the past 10 years, have you remembered that event? At any given point?
I'm thinking of, yes.
Okay. Do you know that when the event happened, you create a memory? The moment you remember that event, you create another memory. The next time you remember that event, you don't remember the actual event. You remember the last time you remembered it. And that goes on and on and on. And that's why if you ask people about an event that happened 10 years ago and they haven't spoken or seen each other since, they all will describe that event completely different. Because the memory has changed over time, because you're not remembering the actual event, you're just remembering the last time you remembered it. And that's how your memory changes over time and isn't accurate anymore. And that's a fact. That's something we know about how the brain works.
So 12 guys' memory all changed in exactly the same way to make them think that Jesus rose from the dead. Is that what we're saying here?
What I'm saying is that you have 3 accounts of the resurrection, which are inconsistent. Which leads me to the fact that at least that happened. Which leads me to another fact, that we still don't have a clue what actually happened. And if it even happened. Because people can remember things that never even happened. That's been proven as well.
Okay, so now we're going to talk about the resurrection accounts. This is good.
No, I don't want to talk about the resurrection accounts. What I would like to talk about...
Then why go there? If as long as we're here, let's go here. This is the end road where I want to go.
We're still talking about the Bible. What I would like to know is, why is the Bible relevant? That's where we started off of.
Okay, well then we should have stayed there until I could show you that the Bible is relevant. Don't go jumping all over the place. Don't go to prophecy. Don't go to the differing accounts of the resurrection if you are not prepared to accept the Bible as true, which is what I still need to prove to you.
Sorry, Chris, but I didn't go to prophecy. You did.
Fine,
you can listen this.
I actually find that very difficult to believe because I don't think I actually wanted to draw you to prophecy. I think I might have mentioned prophecy and then you jumped on it.
You mentioned it as evidence.
Okay, well what? No. Oh, I remember how we got into prophecy. You were talking about the Old Testament and what
all the Old Testament.
Yeah, and I was explaining, well, we want to keep the Old Testament because it's God's story and has prophecies in it. And then you jumped on the prophecy. That's how we got there.
Okay.
And this is exactly what I'm trying to not do. I'm trying just to bring you to the resurrection. You want proof that the Bible is true? Okay, I'm going to bring you there before I take you to the resurrection.
Okay.
Don't jump straight to the resurrection if you're not prepared to take the Bible seriously.
I don't think that the resurrection proves the Bible true. Because there's a lot more in the Bible than just the resurrection.
Fine, I don't need you to believe the entire Bible. I don't need you to believe that... I don't need you to believe that we live in a young earth. I don't need you to believe that the world is flat. I don't need you to believe that the world is round. I don't need you to believe that the world was created in 7 days. I need you to believe that Jesus Christ is your Lord and Savior. That is the only thing that matters.
Okay, and the only reason to make me believe that is that you can prove that the Bible is actually true. And in order to do that, you have to start with the Bible and not with the resurrection and not with the Jesus account.
No, I don't.
Because that's only a tiny part in the book.
then don't go to the book. Let me start with Tacitus.
But Tacitus is irrelevant because Tacitus wasn't even alive when we got the Bible. Tacitus died 200 years before. So Tacitus wouldn't have even come close to knowing what would make the Bible, and if even Jesus would make the Bible. Because 200 years later,
I don't follow you anymore. What are you trying to say?
What I'm trying to say is Tacitus wrote about Christians.
Yes.
Tacitus could Tacitus could never have known that Christianity was even a thing 200 years later.
And this is why Tacitus is important, because he confirms that Christians existed 325 years before. I'm exaggerating. 300 years before the Christianity takes over as the official religion of the Roman Empire. Before its books are canonized in the Bible. He confirms that Christians exist and that they follow someone named Christus.
I can go even further. Egyptians are mentioned in the Bible. Pharaohs are mentioned in the Bible. They did exist.
Leave the Bible out of this. We're not talking about the Bible yet. We're talking about Tacitus, Christians, and Christ.
That's where I don't get you, because if I mention something from the Bible, I have to leave it out. You mention one single person that's only mentioned.
I am only talking about the Bible when you bring it up.
That's only mentioned.
I am telling you, leave the Bible out.
Okay, let's leave the Bible out. But that means that we leave the resurrection out.
Not yet.
Oh yes.
Certainly does not mean that.
Unless you can point me to any extra biblical account where the resurrection is mentioned.
The Didache.
The what?
The Didache. It's a first catechism of the Christian Church, and I was just reading on Wikipedia earlier because I didn't know this. Apparently, they have dated the Didache to the 1st century. That's kind of important.
Why?
Probably from textual analysis. The way they use words and the way the handwriting looks, because we have an original Greek manuscript now, apparently. We've had it for over 125 years now. It was rediscovered in 1873. I didn't know that.
Okay. And that has an exact account of Jesus and the crucifixion.
No, it does not have an account of Jesus and the crucifixion. What it proves is that Christians practice Christianity exactly as they do today back then. Not exactly, but core tenets, okay? Baptism, Lord's Supper, the Apostles' Creed, the Lord's Prayer. I need to study the Didache more, but if you want another proof...
Which is relevant how?
Because it proves that the Christian church existed in the 1st century.
Which I didn't contest.
Okay, but you do contest that Jesus did not rise from the dead. The Christian faith came from somewhere other than Christ.
What I do contest
Correct?
is that one single thing, and that's that the Bible is the inerrant word of the living God as it is proclaimed by Christians.
Okay, leave the Bible out of this. We're not talking about the Bible. We're talking about everything else.
I'm leaving out the Bible. I'm still waiting on one single thing that leads me to the fact that what the Bible says is actually true.
Okay.
And the only things we have now so far is that you have denied a couple of things that the Bible says is actually true, which confirms
Are you
my
talking about
point.
flat Earth theory? Are you talking
That's
about that?
that's one.
Leave the flat Earth out of it. We're not talking about flat Earth. We're talking about the resurrection of Christ.
We're not talking about the resurrection of Christ. We're talking about
Then we've been talking about two different things this entire time.
I think so, because you hinge the entire truth of the Bible on the
No, I
resurrection.
hinge truth itself on the resurrection.
Okay.
Again,
why?
leave out the Bible.
Why?
Because the resurrection is the focal point. The resurrection is the center of all apologetics. The crucifixion is the center of all theology.
Okay, and where did you learn about the crucifixion? And where did you learn about the resurrection?
I was taught as a child, you know that. But that doesn't mean that that's my... You were taught as a child that the world was round. We both were. Does that mean that that's our only proof ever that the earth is round?
You're misinterpreting my question.
Okay.
Where do people learn about the resurrection? Where do Christians learn about the resurrection?
Okay, don't say we and then qualify by saying Christians. These are two very different groups.
I'm just, yes, and I'm giving you two distinct groups. You can pick. You can pick any of the two.
Okay, then let's go with, how do I know? Where do biblical and first century scholars know?
Okay, where
do they go to know? Okay.
Yes, where do...
So they look at sources such as Tacitus, Pliny the Younger, Josephus, to know that the church existed in the 1st century AD and that they followed a certain Christus who was crucified under Pontius Pilate within the 1st century AD. And then this is still just Tacitus.
Okay. Let me stop you here.
Okay.
You're telling me that the first time in your life that you heard about the resurrection was when people showed you the writings of Tacitus?
Peter, we're about to start leaving my life out of it. This is exactly why I don't...
You picked it. I gave you two groups.
No, I did not prove that my... I did not take my life as
I didn't want
to proof for the resurrection.
I didn't want you to go to yourself. I asked you and I gave you two groups. Where do people learn about Jesus Christ? Or
Peter, stop conflating things then.
That's what I asked you 10 minutes ago.
All right.
I'll rephrase my question. What is our main source for the resurrection?
The Bible.
Okay.
That's the one that everyone goes to. That's not the one that we show that it is true. The Bible is where we go for information on how the resurrection went down. It is not where we go to know that it actually happened.
Where do you go to know that it actually happened?
Tacitus, Pliny the Younger, Josephus, the early church fathers, the history of the apostles, the Didache.
None of those you mentioned are contemporary. So none of those...
Peter, nothing is contemporary in the ancient world.
Sorry, but there is. There were over 100 historians.
Nothing is contemporary in the way that you want contemporary to mean.
What do you think contemporary means?
Happening at the same time. That's the way you want it to mean, correct?
No, it's not. It's not happening at the same time. If someone is someone else's contemporary, that means they lived at the same time. There are historians that lived at the time Jesus was alive. Over 100, I can name you. And none of those wrote a single letter about Jesus.
Because
Not one.
Jesus' ministry happened in Israel, in
There were
Judea
people,
specifically.
there were people writing about that area and never mentioned it. You were not aware of
Because
this?
Christianity was just getting started. It was just getting off the ground.
Do you think the Bible is accurate when it says that Jesus performed miracles?
Why are you bringing the Bible into this?
Because I want to make a point clear. And I don't have another source for Jesus. Just like you don't have another source for Jesus.
So you're just writing me off when I bring up Tacitus, Pliny the Younger,
No,
Church Fathers, Didache.
I just want to make
Peter, you are. You're being arbitrary in what you accept and what you reject. The same way I am with evolution.
You dismiss historians because you said Christianity was only getting started. What I'm getting at is that what happened at the time.
Absence of evidence is not evidence of absence. Everyone knows that.
I'm sure you're correct, and I agree you're correct.
Okay.
What I don't agree with is that we have a guy running around performing miracles, and none of the historians notices that. He gains a following. No one notices that. He rises from the dead. No one notices that. Along with him, a lot of people come from the grave and roam the streets of Jerusalem, and nobody notices that. No one writes a single word about it. And you don't think that's a little bit suspicious?
How many of those historians were Jewish? Because I only know one, and that's Josephus.
What does that have to do with it? Because historians were writing about different people.
Yes, and how many of them were writing about the Jews, and furthermore, were within Judaism to know what was happening? How many of those historians were within Israel around from 25 AD to 35 AD?
So you would only just trust Jewish historians?
I would only trust a Jewish historian to say, this is who Jesus was, and he is not who these other people are saying he is. But the fact that they don't mention him means that you can't rely on those historians to say that Jesus was not alive.
No, I'm correct. But what you fail to see is that something extraordinary happened there. Something that was so out of the ordinary that people would have written about it.
And they did, but you don't accept those accounts.
They didn't. The earliest writings about Christ stem decades after his death. Not one single historian mentions anything that happened during his life.
I think it was Africanus who cites Phlegon and Thallus. We don't have the writings of Phlegon and Thallus anymore, but they record the darkness and the earthquake that happened on what we call Good Friday, when Jesus was crucified and died. Would these be the historians you're looking for?
No, because they
then
listen.
What are you asking for, Peter? What's good enough for you?
Let me finish. why I say no. Because they're describing a natural event, not a supernatural event. There's
No,
a
they
difference.
describe it as most unnatural, according to Africanus.
Well, maybe they thought it was unnatural at the time. It still is a natural event. An earthquake is a natural event. There's nothing supernatural in an earthquake.
But they record the events that you're looking for. When you say you're looking for a historian who recorded the events of Jesus' life, and specifically his death in this case.
Yes, and an earthquake is not part of Jesus' life. It's something natural that happens during someone's lifetime.
And the darkness? Because that was what Africanus was going for. It was an unnatural darkness that spread across the land. And I was very disappointed to find that we don't have Thales or Phlegon's writings anymore, so that I could look at that and see like what they said about it.
I have to be honest, I'm not aware about what that darkness means. I've read a lot of stuff, a lot of parts of the Bible, even recently. I couldn't say where it is mentioned and what it was referring to, so I can't give you an honest answer to that.
Okay, all right.
Because I can't go on and lie, because darkness could darkness could mean to me something just as simple as an eclipse. That would mean darkness all over the land, at least in the land where I live, because Holland isn't that big. So that's something.
Was I arguing with you on Twitter, or was it someone else where I tried to make an analogy between the resurrection of Jesus and a stock market crash?
That wasn't me, because I can tell you why. Because the moment you agreed to doing a live talk, that's the moment where I preferably stop arguing with you, because it would hurt the live talk, because we would be referencing a conversation on Twitter that not everyone listening in would be able to check.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
Okay, so now an honest question. Is there, if we leave the resurrection aside?
If we leave the Bible aside?
No.
I'm keeping the resurrection on the table.
If we,
as the central issue.
Let me finish.
Okay.
If we leave the resurrection aside, is there anything else in the Bible that would for you be something that's that you can prove in any way is actually true? Because we're still hinging on one event, and we're not coming any closer to whether we can have that event confirmed.
Well, I'm trying to drag you to it, and you keep fighting me. But whatever. Okay, I know what you're saying.
I'm not. Listen, if anything I do, anything I say, is not fighting you. When I have reason,
really, because it feels like you're fighting me.
No, not in the least. Because here's the thing. What I want to happen is that if we hang up, that we can still be friends. If I start fighting you,
we're still friends, Peter.
Okay, if I start fighting you, that's not likely to happen. So I'm not fighting you. What I'm trying to do is, and that's not condescending, because that's applicable to me. Let me say that at first.
Please do, yeah.
If you have a set view of any given thing, and you're really convinced, then it's very hard to step aside and to take a look at yourself, if what you're convinced of, if it's reasonable to be that convinced, and to see maybe any flaws in what you were thinking so far. Because it happens to me, and that's also the reason why I do talks like this, because you could actually say something to me that makes me think, and that has happened with a Christian I've talked to.
Okay.
So it's in no way an attack. What
Good.
I would like you, what I would like you to do is think about what you believe, and could it be possible? I'm not saying it is possible. I'm not saying it's actually happening, but could it be possible that there's something you interpreted differently, or maybe wrong, and that wouldn't even be your fault, because Christianity is something that we have for over 2,000 years now, and that has changed over time, and different people look at it different ways, because we already discussed people actually believe in a flat earth just because the Bible says so. And the
I
fact
didn't know
that
that's why they believe in flat earth, but okay.
Actually it does.
Looks like I've got a few conversations to have with my Christian
I actually made friends with a Christian, and maybe it's silly to say, but I'm kind of proud that we're still friends, seeing where he is in his life at the moment. But he's convinced that the earth is flat.
And he won't be moved if I tell him that I've flown around the world.
No.
Interesting. Okay.
I don't think so, because he thinks the Bible is true, and the Bible describes the earth as a circle, and the Bible.
That's not what it says.
Yes, it's absolutely what it says.
Yeah, it says as a circle, because I don't have a word for sphere. Whatever. Anyway.
Yes, but they had a word for sphere, and that's where we.
It's also in Hebrew poetry. Whatever. Yes.
Okay, but I'm not arguing a flat earth with you, because I know you don't believe that. What I would like to do is at least move on from the resurrection and see if there's another thing that could be reason to believe that the Bible is actually true. Is there another major significant thing in the Bible? Because I could name a couple. And I think I could name a couple that you actually believe happened.
Such as Daniel?
Such as Genesis. Such as Genesis.
Okay, so let's not go to Genesis. Because to go to Genesis, we need to talk about other things first. Do I have more reasons for believing in a God? Yes, I do. Do I have more reasons for believing that Jesus Christ is that God? No, I don't. So I would prefer to stay on the resurrection.
Well, we're not going anywhere with the resurrection, I'm afraid. And I think I need to read up on a couple of things. Maybe you need to read up on a couple of things.
Sure, let's both read up on a couple of things. That's one of the things I want to do.
You just said, do I have other reasons to believe in a God? You said yes. Can I ask what those reasons are?
you might laugh, but
I never laugh.
eh,
At least
Uh,
not when these things are concerned.
okay. Well,
I'm not honest. I'm not honest again. I would laugh, but uh, that would originate in how people how their attitude is, and in your case, I wouldn't laugh.
I'm not sure, but I think I've just been insulted. Anyway, the
No.
I'm just playing. It's
Okay.
Star Trek quote.
Okay.
But okay, so I mean, if you want to know what my other reasons are for believing in God, and we can talk about why I don't use them. But okay, so cosmological argument, intelligent design, biogenesis, and Behe's mousetrap. Those are 4 things if you want to talk about any of those.
Okay.
Now, I am not a specialist in any of that. That is not even where I try to go with anything, because I very, very, very much just want to talk about the resurrection. And you may not think so, but I think we have a lot more to talk about there.
Okay, but I agree we could have a lot more to talk about it, but we're not getting anywhere.
I think we were, actually. It wasn't very far, but I think we were.
Well, I'm willing to do as much talks on it as you would like, but for the moment, I would at least get one other subject in.
What's that?
You mentioned the Kalam cosmological argument.
Not the Kalam cosmological argument. I mean, it's more it's more accurate to say I believe in the Big Bang cosmological argument.
What's the Big Bang? Can you tell me what that is?
It's just a meme. In the beginning, there was nothing, and then it exploded. Explain. You know, it's
why would anyone need to explain that? Because it's
absurd.
Yes, it is.
It looks absurd, which means we are missing information.
No, it doesn't look absurd. It is absurd. Because no one is claiming that. Yes, several Christians are claiming that scientists claim it. But there's no scientist alive in the world that claims that.
Okay.
Not a single one.
Well, we can talk about that. But that's like the weakest of my arguments. It's just
what would be your strongest if we leave the resurrection out of this? What would be your strongest argument for God?
Peter, I'm not going to leave the resurrection out of it. Yeah, no.
I'm not saying leave it out of it. I'm saying aside from it, what would be your strongest argument for God?
No, I'm keeping the resurrection front and center.
So
there's more we could talk about. I could talk about why biogenesis is insane and why Behe's mousetrap is a valid argument.
No, it isn't.
Intelligent design. Yeah, see, exactly. We could talk about that. I don't care about those arguments. I care about the resurrection.
Okay. So if tomorrow someone would come with sufficient evidence that the resurrection never happened, that would crush your belief completely?
I'm thinking. Positive evidence that the resurrection never happened?
Mm-hmm.
So, like, I tell them Jesus Christ died by crucifixion. His disciples claim that he was alive 3 days later. What do you say happened? And they give a valid answer to that. That's what we're saying?
Yes. because we have
Yeah, it'd
been
be a
very
pretty crippling blow to what.
we have been very close to that, actually. I don't know if you're aware of the guy who found the ossuaries in Jerusalem.
Which ossuaries?
He found a grave. In that grave were ossuaries of a man named Moses, of a woman named Mary, uh, of a son they had called Jesus, uh, two
Yeah,
other
because
sons,
these sound like
two
very common
two other
Jewish
sons,
names.
two other sons they had, and don't ask me the name. I think,
Okay, Peter. My computer's about
but
to
the
turn
names.
off.
The
Peter,
sorry.
my computer's about to shut off. So we'll
Okay.
yeah, we'll call it there. Let me just say one more thing before I we end. Um, Look, the more we can fight and still be friends, the better friends we are.
Okay. I
So
agree.
let me say that. Okay.
I agree.
All right. Cool.
What do you want to do for the next one?
Well, we
Do
can
you
hit.
want do you want it where you decide the topic and grill me, which would, for at least for me, be nice for a change?
Well, it looks like we've already picked the topic, or at least I've forced the topic, the resurrection. I mean, historical evidence for it. And then we can also talk about that thing you were just talking about with Moses, the ossuaries for Moses and Mary, with someone named
Um,
Jesus as their
yes,
child. Yeah.
okay. They found a grave. Mary and Joseph, Jesus, his two brothers, and a woman called Mariamne,
Okay.
which who was married to Jesus.
To a
Uh,
Jesus. Okay.
to Jesus, the son of Mary and Joseph, brother of the two brothers that are mentioned in the Bible as well, that Jesus supposedly had. And the Israeli government shut the tomb down.
All right. I'll look into that. Does it have a name? Does this have a thing I can look
I'll
for?
try. I'll try and look it up.
Okay.
I'm looking at the chat, and I think people are a little bit behind.
Or they just got
So
tired of me.
no, I don't think so, because we still have people watching. So
Okay.
that's a good thing.
All right.
We'll end it here. I
Sure.
I would like for you, but that's completely your choice, and I don't want you to tell me right now. I would like for you to pick a topic uh, in my uh, view, in my world, because we could talk the resurrection, but it would be a very short talk because I don't believe it happened, and then we're done.
I think it would be a very long talk.
Yes,
It wouldn't look
but
much different from what we've had, but I think it would be
what
okay.
what I would like is for you to come up with a topic I don't know in advance, because I don't want to prepare, and I don't want even to have a chance to prepare. So if that's okay, you can choose any topic you want. Next time you're going to ask me the questions, you decide the topic. Is that okay? And I think he dropped off. Well, I'll continue this last part on Twitter. For the moment, the thanks to the people in the chat uh, to drop by, um, and I hope it was at least a little bit entertaining, and I hope I was accurate, because I see someone in the chat who I know is a lot more accurate than I am. So, hi, Paul. I saw you. Uh, Thanks for stopping by, because to me, that's very nice. And for the people listening who can't see the chat anymore, the one I'm referring to is Paul from Paulogia. I urge you to subscribe to his channel, because in the short time that he's been on YouTube, I've learned an awful lot. So having him watching me is kind of cool. So I'll leave you here. I'd say thanks for listening. I want to thank Chris again for coming on for the second time, and I'll hope it was interesting, and that you'll be tuning in next time. See you next time. Bye bye.